Welcome back to Krol and Partners. Today I want to step away from major power rivalry and focus on the country that is often underestimated in global strategy discussions, Canada. In 2026, Canada is not in crisis, it is in transition, and the transition is structural. Canada faces a defining strategic question. Can it reduce vulnerability in the United States without destabilizing the economic model that depends on it? Because the reality is clear. Nearly 78% of Canadian exports go to the United States. Trade flows exceed $900 billion annually. Energy, automotive, supply chains, industrial components deeply integrated. These integrations bring stability. If US industrial policy shifts, Canada adjusts. If US demand contracts, Canadian GDP feels it. If tariff disputes emerge, volatility transmits instantly. Diversification, therefore, is not ambition. It is risk management. Now, let's look east. China accounts for only 4 till 5% of Canadian exports. Yet it represents a strategic paradox. China is a major buyer of resources, energy, agriculture, critical materials, but the relationship is politically fragile. Diplomatic tensions, investment security, regulatory friction. Canada wants access to the market but without strategic dependency. So, what does Ottawa do? It turns to Europe. Under CETA, trade with the European Union now exceeds 120 billion Canadian dollars. The United Kingdom market has expanded significantly in metals and resources. Europe offers something the US does not: diversification with regulatory alignment. Then there is the Indo-Pacific, India, Japan, South Korea, ASEAN. Growth is there, but geography imposes cost, and diplomacy imposes friction. This is the where Canada's structural challenge becomes visible. It is geographically tied to the United States. It is economically tied to resources, and it's strategically tied to Western alliances. Which brings us to sectoral reality. Canada's export backbone remains energy and natural resources: oil, gas, LNG potential, critical materials, battery metals, nickel, lithium, cobalt. There are strategic assets in the world of energy transition, but commodity reliance has limits. Manufacturing has weakened in certain areas, especially automotive. Competition from Asia persists. What remains competitive? Aerospace, defense collaboration, digital services, professional services exports. The long term question is whether Canada can move up the value chain or whether it remains primarily a supplier of inputs to other economies. And now we move north. The Arctic. This is not symbolic geography. Climate change is transforming the economic logic of the North. The Northwest Passage is becoming essentially navigable. Shipping routes may shorten, resource basins may open, but opportunity invites competition. Russia has expanded Arctic infrastructure. China calls itself a near Arctic state. The United States is modernizing NORAD and polar defense coordination. For Canada, sovereignty in the Arctic is not theoretical, it's economic, it's military, it's institutional. But here is the constraint. The majority of Canada's population and economic capacity remains concentrated in southern urban corridors: Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. The north is underdeveloped. Infrastructure is limited. Ports, roads, grids, housing. Demographics become strategy. Canada has one of the highest immigration rates on the OECD, 400,000 to 500,000 new arrivals annually. Skilled workers, STEM professionals, healthcare, logistic. But attracting migrants to Toronto is easier than retaining them in the Arctic regions. If northern development is strategic, migration policy must become targeted. Regional initiatives, educational pipelines, industrial alignment, otherwise Arctic ambition remain theoretical. Now, let's step back. Canada is not trying to become a global hegemon. It is trying to become strategically resilient. Its core vulnerabilities are excessive US dependence, commodity exposure, geographic imbalance, demographic concentration. Its structural strengths are political stability, resource wealth, alliance integration, high skilled migration inflow. The risk for Canada in 2026 is not crisis, it is stagnation through inertia. If diversification remains slow, vulnerability persists. If Arctic policy remains underfunded, sovereignty weakens. If manufacturing and services are not upgraded, long-term growth moderated. The opportunity, however, is significant. In a world fragmenting into global blocks, Canada sits inside the Western architecture, but with global resource leverage. If managed correctly, Canada could position itself as a critical mineral hub, an LNG supplier to Asia, and transatlantic industrial partner, an Arctic government's leader. But this requires coordinated policy, not incremental adjustment. Canada in 2026 is not defined by instability, it is defined by strategic choice. Will it remain economically dependent but stable? Or will it build diversified resilience within a multipolar global order? This is a structural question, and that question will define the decade ahead. Thank you for listening. If you follow institutional geopolitics and strategic economic positioning, subscribe to Krol and Partners on YouTube.